Hello, everybody. Nice wide audience, I'm happy to know. I'm going to be talking, I don't know unless plans have changed. I'm going to be talking for about 20 minutes or so, maybe, give or take. Is that correct, Chandra? Is that correct? Plus Q&A, exactly. But the way I speak, I don't just speak continuously. I would love to have an engagement with you right from the beginning. I see when Diana was asking earlier, I noticed there were many students. I'd love some involvement from the students. So please feel free just to raise your hand. There is somebody out there with a microphone. They'll pass it to you. And let's have a conversation. Okay? Great. So, well, thank you all for inviting me. Can you all hear me at the back? Yeah, I'm used to a lapel mic, so if this goes down, just ask me to raise it, okay? Thank you all for inviting me. As the introduction is already mentioned, I work with the unconscious bias. Now, you're going to be saying, what's that about, right? Now, essentially, the word bias, if you think about the word bias, that means to discriminate or to differentiate. And it's very important that all of us do know how to have a bias, do know how to differentiate. It's when it's a negative differentiation or a preconceived judgment, which is negative, that it then results in a negative output. So what I'm asking you to do is think about the biases that you think you may have and see if there's any reason to have those biases. Or let me rephrase that. First and foremost, every one of us in this room, including me, have biases. Okay? Good and bad and ugly. But equally, all of us in this room have biases that we don't know that we have. So now what, you ask yourself? I mean, if I don't know that I don't know, then what am I going to do about it, right? That's the point that I'm going to try in a very short window to make you understand. Chandra, for example, has already done 2 PhDs, and one of them is on one tiny aspect of what I talk about. So this is an enormous, enormous topic. And it's not something that can be addressed just in 20 minutes. But what I'm hoping is that when I speak to you for 20 minutes, most of you will begin to understand what this means for you and your personal development. Because unconscious bias is so powerful that it is the underbelly, it is the foundation about anything and everything that you do. And you're thinking, that's big, isn't it? I mean, earlier on, we heard the Vice-Chancellor, Ms. Latha, speaking. Then we heard Diana speaking. Then we heard from JSS speaking. And they were all saying very similar things as far as I'm concerned. Because what I'm saying is what they were saying. Just different language was being used. That's all. So I want for you to try and connect the dots between all the speeches you've heard, including what I'm saying to you. Okay? So I'm going to start by telling you a little story, and then I'm going to explain to you why I've told you the story. So, I was born in Bombay, and then I grew up in Calcutta. And in Calcutta, we lived in 2 tall apartment buildings. And in the 2 tall apartment buildings, they were all-inclusive, there were 40 flats, and 39 out of the 40 flats had parents and child or children. So the children, we would come down and we would play. That was it. But there was one flat where there was only one adult man living and no children. And my brother, sister, and I would very often visit, his name was Desmond, would visit Desmond, we'd hang out with him, we'd talk to him. We also called him Desmond, which was very unusual, even though he was an adult, whereas we called the parents of our friends auntie and uncle, as was expected. Fast forward many, many, many years, at some point, and I don't know what the relevance was, I computed and I put 2 and 2 together, and I suddenly realized that Desmond was gay. Okay? Desmond was a homosexual. Now, when I computed that and I realized that, what it taught me was that I am so very lucky. One of the reasons I do what I do is because of my liberal, accepting, non-judgmental upbringing. Because at no point did my parents say to me, don't go to Desmond's house, homosexuality is bad, you mustn't go there. Now, if they had, what would that have done to me? So why am I telling you this story? Because I want you all to think about the stories or the sentences or the comments that your parents might have made to you, that now that you're all adults, or nearly adults for those of the students, and you say, hang on a minute, is that really relevant? Is that really true? Because if you look the world over, and I'm not going to have a political conversation, there is, for example, an enormous amount of anti-Muslim diatribe. Now, you have to ask yourself, why is that? Do you have any Muslim friends? Those of you who are Muslim, how do you feel about that? Now, why am I saying all of this to you? What's the impact in terms of training, you're asking yourself? Okay, so all of us went to school at some point. Who was your favorite teacher? Would somebody like to tell me? Yep. Could the microphone come here, please? There's somebody here raising their hand. Yep, thank you.
It's my engineering teacher. His name was Shoaib Ahmed.
Okay, what did you like about this teacher?
He liked to keep things simple. Like say which I don't see normally these days. When I started engineering, his whole aspect was on not to teach a programming language, but as such, teach how to code and how to think about the world and connect your program to your real world. So that's what I liked about him a lot.
So he was creative, he was innovative.
Yes.
Yep. I'm not an engineer, I don't understand the language. But you understood it in a way because he reached out to you in a very simple way. Yep. Now, can you hold that microphone? Can you remember a teacher you didn't like? You don't have to mention what subject if you don't want to. And can you tell us why you didn't like that teacher?
Probably not any of the teachers that I didn't like, because all teachers try to put out their best, but yeah, some teachers might not be able to put it across.
Oh, that's very generous of you. Okay. All right, thank you. Well, the point I'm trying to make is that teachers are extremely influential people. This gentleman here, and thank you for that, has absorbed the knowledge of his subject because his teacher was so creative and innovative in the way the way he taught you. Now, whether you're a teacher or whether you're a trainer, or whether you're a student, or whether you're somebody within a corporate environment with a trainer standing in front of you, you will be influenced by that individual, whether it's me on stage, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a trainer, you will be influenced by our stories. And if we make it simple, and if we try not to make judgment, only then will you actually learn. If we make it simple, if we make it creative, and that's exactly what happens. Instead, if you had a teacher, and I remember many teachers like that in my schooling, who would come and who would sit at the top, would open their books, and they would just read. And I could sit back and fall asleep. And I hate chemistry, sorry. Why do I hate chemistry? Because I personally believe that my chemistry teacher wasn't creative enough. So, let's come back into what we're talking about today, which is trainers, aspiring trainers, students who want to learn and grow. So, if many of you are trainers, I saw that when Diana asked you to raise your hands, surely you've got to feel the subject. And that engineering teacher felt the subject in his belly, genuinely understood it. So those of you who are trainers, you have to ask yourself, what's influencing you? So you come into a room, you see a bunch of people, you have to deliver a training course. Now, this is where the unconscious bias comes in. You look at people, all of us, including me, will make a snap judgment. We look, oh, that's a nice dress, I like her shoes, and all the stuff going on in my head. That's fine. But it's when you go to the next stage and you say, oh, look at that person, very dark-skinned. I don't like that. I don't want to talk to them. Actually, you know what? I'm going to talk to you because you're lighter-skinned. So therefore, I just instinctively think there's a connection between you and me. Have you felt that? Come on, let's be honest. Right? This, unfortunately, is the reality of the world that we live in. Every single day, you will be bombarded with various different things in the newspaper, on television, on serials that you're watching in the evening, on ads. People at the back, could you show me that first slide? Just the first one on that PowerPoint? Any of you bank with ICICI? Some. So all of you would have got an email, just post-budget, where they said something about budget, and they sent this picture. I don't know how clear this is, because I just took a photograph and shoved it on there, because I got this 2 days ago, and I thought, I've got to show you this photograph. What do you notice about this picture? If you can see it at all. Nobody notice anything? Shall I read it out? Because you probably can't see, okay? Pardon me? Okay. Forget about the bit on the top. The top says Union Budget 2017 XYZ. Then there is a briefcase. And on the briefcase, there are 4 people. The top left, it says salaried class. The top right says student. The bottom left says homemaker. The bottom right says entrepreneur.
Gender bias.
Hello, where was that? Thank you. What else do you see in there? Fair and lovely. Now, this is the kind of stuff that happens like this. Most of you, if I hadn't pointed it out, wouldn't have noticed it. Because it's normal, right? Because surely the girls have to be as white as Diana, and the guys can be brown-skinned, and that's just fine. Surely the girl has to wear nice bright like lipstick as well. She's the only one who's got a mouth, please notice, with bright red lipstick. The guys don't even have a mouth. And all of them, their colors are slightly darker, the color of their skin. Now, why am I showing you this picture? Because I'm trying to explain to you the power, the importance of unconscious bias, and how, without meaning to, it starts self-perpetuating itself. Am I making sense? Because if I'm not, raise your hand, ask me a question, and I will explain. But there's one example. Also 2 days ago, but I didn't have a picture, so I couldn't get one. I read the paper, and the story was that there was a little girl, 6-year-old girl, who bought, you might have read it in the paper too, who bought a packet of Dabur juice. You know Dabur juice packets? So her father bought her a packet of Dabur juice. So she is an English-speaking child. She goes to an English medium education, so she could read what's written on it. And I'm paraphrasing because I haven't got the box juice in my hand. But it said something like, this juice is very good for the family. It will make him strong and give him good bones, or something like that. So she read it and said, hang on a minute, I'm not going to drink this juice. It's for boys, it's not for girls. The reason it's in the paper is because the father then contacted Maneka Gandhi, the union minister, and she is trying to address that. That's why I read it. There's 2 examples that came into my inbox that I read in the paper. Now that I'm saying this to you, both happen to be gender. But it's not just about gender. There's so many things out there that influence us unconsciously. And again, you know, for example, my surname, when I was growing up, in fact, I'll tell you a different story. When I was quite little, because my brother is older than I am, and we were in Bombay. And he acted in a play, in a school play. And in fact, it was Oliver Twist, and he was the Artful Dodger, if any of you know that story. But anyway, he did a great job because he's a good actor. And at the end of the play, the very senior boy from class 11 came to speak to him. That very senior boy happened to be Rishi Kapoor, the film actor. I mean, the film actor's son those days. He wasn't even a film actor, it's a long time ago. But he went up to my brother and said, good job you did, what's your caste? No clue. He went back home crying to his father and said, Dad, Rishi Kapoor came and spoke to me. And he said, what's your caste? And I couldn't answer. Why haven't you told me what my caste is? Do you see what I'm saying? This is the power of unconscious bias. My father is a Nair, as is my mother, but my father chose to use his house name, which is Tharoor. And therefore, nobody had any clue what caste we were. Now you do because of the fame and glory of other people. But why would you otherwise? Do you see what I'm saying? And so why are these things relevant? Why is it we make judgments, opinions, and assumptions based on different aspects of us that actually have no relevance in your learning, in your developing, in your growing? Whether you're a student, whether you're a corporate person, whether you are a trainer, it doesn't actually matter. Are you questioning yourself? Are you asking yourself, now, what kind of biases do I have? Are they relevant? Because for those of you, any one of you, whether it's students, trainers, or corporate people, it doesn't actually matter, what do you think are the advantages of being aware of your unconscious bias? And I'm not going to give you the answer, so somebody better answer.
We can work on it and improve ourselves.
And then what?
To be good citizens, normally.
And then what?
And to be successful in life.
In what way? What
In
does success
all
mean
ways.
to you?
In all ways. Like me as a person to the society, me as a father, me as a husband, in all aspects where I live.
Thank you. I'm just pushing you, you know that. Thank you for
Yeah,
that.
thank you so much.
No, but absolutely. And the thing is, this is how powerful beginning to understand about the unconscious bias is. And I'm glad you said what you did, because it is also, where should this begin? It should begin at home for ourselves as human beings. Me as a person, me as a husband, me as a father. That's what you said. That's where your learning begins. You are not two different people. You are not a student at school or college, or an entrepreneur, or a trainer, or a teacher, and then you go home and you're somebody else. You're actually the same individual, wherever you are. So you can't come to one place and be like so, and go somewhere else and be like so. Right? So you've got to be, and especially, and thank you for saying father, especially those of you who are parents. This is the opportunity, because you have got such level of power in your hands, because this is the opportunity for the future of India. So if you have two children, a boy and a girl, and if the boy cries, do you say, stop crying like a girl? Ask yourself that. Why are you doing that? Is like a girl a negative thing? Right? We've had a whole bunch of extremely powerful women that we've already heard, and I'm sure there are many women in here who are also very powerful. So why do we choose to react like that so instinctively? Would you like to, are you going to raise your hand? No? Somebody's raising their hand at the back. Please pass the microphone. Oh, you've got it. Thank you.
The advantages of realizing that unconsciousness, this biasness, the point is, this unconsciousness has made man become robot. We are acting like machine. We have lost our balance with the nature. Everything is spontaneous. We have lost our naturality. So once we realize that whatever we are doing this unconsciously, this is not good. This has made us lose our balance with the nature. Man today has become a machine. We don't even laugh out loudly because we fear it is not good to laugh out loudly. These are all fake smiles which we are giving to each other. So this is what we need to realize, that this unconsciousness, this biasness is taking us away from us in this digital world. We may have brought the world into our palms, but we have lost ourselves. This is a heavy price which we have paid to bring this digital world in our palm. So I think this unconsciousness realizing is going to help the person to reach to his desired destination. After all, a multidisciplinary approach is required, which will involve your physical, mental, and emotional body together. Then only you see a person will be easily reaching to his desired destinations in life.
Thank you. Absolutely. And if you remember what Diana said earlier, yes, you should come up on stage with me. Diana said something similar as well. And in fact, okay, I'm just going to, because it's well connected to what you've just said and what Diana said earlier. So I'm going to just make an expression, and I want you to just shout out what this means to you, okay? What does that mean? What does that mean, that expression I just made? Yep. Just shout it out. Come on, you don't need a microphone. Grumpy? Frowning? What? Irritated? Yep. What the hell? Exactly. Okay, now I'd like for you to give me the answer to 325 multiplied by 673. Come on. No? No. Okay, the point I'm making, which is what both of you made earlier on when you were on and what you just made, is there is a Nobel Prize-winning economist. His name is Daniel Kahneman. And he's written a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And what he says, and I'm totally paraphrasing, it's not a fat enough book, and I'm telling you 30 seconds. But what he's saying is our brains, and people who know brains will know better than I do, that we have 2 bits to our brain, okay? And all of us in this room have these 2 bits. The bit at the back is what's called the reptilian brain. The bit in the front is called the new neocortex brain. So when I made that ugly face, what you were doing is using your reptilian brain. In other words, you were assumptive. You had extreme, strong feelings of certainty. You knew you were saying the right thing. You knew you were not wrong. You'd seen many people, you had pattern matches. You've seen many people look like that. So you knew that meant this. And that's called the reptilian brain. But what you all have is also a new neocortex brain. So when I said, what is x multiplied by y? I just made it up, so I don't know what number I said now. You said, hang on a minute. I don't know the answer to that. So you stopped. Now, if I'd given you time, you would have used your new neocortex brain. You would have got a pen and paper or a calculator, and you would have been quiet, calm, reflective. You would have been ordered, and then you'd have said, here's the answer. Right? But in real life, which one do we mostly use? Yeah? Do you see what I'm saying? What we tend to use without meaning to, because it's easy, because it's expedient, is we constantly use the reptilian brain. So like that gentleman said, like Diana said, let's think about the now. Let's think about stopping. Let's think, for those of you who go to the gym, to getting off the treadmill and putting into practice what you already know. Because by being, and why am I giving you this example? Because this is, again, your unconscious bias. I gave you an unconscious bias example about gender. I'm now giving you an unconscious bias example about tasks that you do. That's how big the whole remit of unconscious bias is. You look, you see, you make a judgment, and you just get on with it. Or you do something all the time, 2 + 2 = 4, you know 2 + 2 = 4. You never stop to think that if I do 1 + 3, I might still get the same answer. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes? Okay. So, when we're asking about teachers, when I'm asking about stories, I want for you, when you're maybe on your lunch break or when you're back home in the evening, to think a little bit about the stories that have defined you. In what way have your stories defined you? Now, if you've had a very traumatic experience, then naturally you're not going to want to forget that because you want to protect yourself. If, on the other hand, all you've done is read something in the newspaper, then why do you believe it? Or all that's happened is when you were growing up, your parents said something to you. Do you still have to believe it? That's the question I'm asking you to ask yourself. It's a very, very big topic. But if you start understanding, so for those of you who are students, many of you are students here, I can see that. For those of you who are students, now when you go into your classrooms and your teacher is teaching you something, your mind will start wandering based on what they're talking about. Because I don't know what subjects you're studying. If you're all from this university, then I'm imagining it's science and technology, but I don't actually know. But based on what they're teaching you, your stories will define you. Because it'll remind you of your teacher experience when you were in school. You will make comparisons. You all do all of this unconsciously. Without even meaning to, you do it unconsciously. Your relationships that you have within your student environment, among students, the relationship you have with your teachers. Think about why you have those relationships. And when you start answering the why question is when you begin to understand how your unconscious bias is influencing you. Yeah? I'm going to show, how many minutes have I spoken? I have no idea. Is somebody managing time? How much have I got? It's almost over. Okay, I'm going to show a short video, and then I'm hoping to get some Q&A from the audience.
بعزف heavy metal. عندي band I started with friends.
He's got long hair, but at work he ties it in a ponytail. Probably piercings.
I read a lot of books. I read cognitive psychology, behavioral science. I've spoken at TED Talks.
Really? Wow.
You look nerdy. Like you think you're cool, but you're still a nerd. أكثر شيء مركز عليها التراث الإماراتي واللغة العربية.
And I also think he's wearing a condor.
Yeah, even I felt that, yeah.
أنا وايد أحب الطبخ. دائما يعني معظم وقتي أطبخ في المطبخ. طبعا يعني في المطبخ.
He's mature, like he's like cheddar cheese.
You mean basically معفن. Extreme sports athlete. I skydive and pretty high risk activity for sure.
Because your actions speak louder than words, right? Yeah.
God, dude,
Whoa.
that's awesome.
لا هوني surprise.
It was amazing when the lights came on and you get to realize who you're actually conversing with.
واستغربت اول شيء لان اول شيء فتحت الليتات الحمراء وما رحت بس اشوف واحد جالس قدامي وكلها تاتوز على وجهه.
This was my expectation of you. This is what you really are.
فشفت شخص مثل هذا طريق ما بعد تكلم. You guys should be swapped. I didn't expect that.
The rocker was someone who I wouldn't expect to be you know, a heavy metal musician.
I should have these tattoos, not you, man.
Change.
الشاب اللي قبالي براسي كنت راسم صورة انه هو راح يكون عربي كثير شكله. That's how you look.
When I saw Garrett on a wheelchair, I was completely taken aback. Hey man, come on.
لما جت العلبة فتحته ما مكتوب عليه شيء ما مكتوب عليه كوكاكولا.
And the minute I turned around, I saw that
labels او الشعار او المغلف او التصميم هو بس للعلب مش للناس.
ترى واضحة. يعني المفروض ما تحكم على الواحد بالشكل.
الشخص مو بلازم يعني ننتقده بشكله لكن اول شيء نتعرف عليه عقب نقدر نقول كيف الشخص.
it changes your mind, your perspective, your heart.
I forgot I had a poem I wanted to read out to you. This is by Rumi, a 13th century Sufi poet. Okay, so it's a long time ago. Two kinds of intelligence. There are two kinds of intelligence. One acquired as a child in school, memorizes facts and concepts from books and from what the teacher says, collecting information from the traditional sciences as well as from the new sciences. With such intelligence, you rise in the world. You get ranked ahead or behind others in regard to your competence in retaining information. You stroll with this intelligence in and out of fields of knowledge, getting always more marks on your preserving tablets. There is another kind of tablet, one already completed and preserved inside you, a spring overflowing its spring box, a freshness in the center of the chest. This other intelligence does not turn yellow or stagnate. It's fluid, and it doesn't move from outside to inside through conduits of plumbing learning. The second knowing is a fountainhead from within you moving out. 13th century when that was written. Which one are you following? That's my question. Any questions from the audience? You know, there's a bias that people, thank you. There is a bias that I have heard because I've been in quite a few cities in India, delivering training and coaching and so on. And the bias that I've heard, conscious or unconscious, is that Kerala, not necessarily Kerala, southern Indian states, Tamil Nadu and Kerala, participants are very quiet and they don't ask questions. Bombay, on the other hand, they ask a lot of questions. And what was really interesting is I did a training session in Bombay, and by God, nobody said a word. Then I went to Chennai 2 days later, and guess what? They were so engaged. And it taught me yet again that we can't stereotype. So break that stereotype and let's have some questions from a southern Indian city, please.
Hi. When I look at the newspapers every day, I see photographs of people in the news. So what I have noticed is if there are, usually the names below the photographs are given from left to right of the people standing in the photograph. But what I have noticed is if a woman is standing on the left, the name of the man on the right is given first and then the woman's name is given second.
I've never seen that, but I will look for it now. I didn't know.
Yeah,
that.
you can look at most of the newspapers, even if it's Malayalam, even the Hindu actually gives, if you have two photographs of a woman on the left and a man on the right, you'll see the man's name first and then the woman's. But if you have two men side by side, it's just left to right.
That's bizarre, because that's something that should be addressed. Because yet again, you're perpetuating unconscious bias. Thank you for that.
Exactly.
I will look for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's somebody here, please, microphone in the front.
Thank you, ma'am, for the wonderful talk. What I wanted to ask, is there a process that we can follow, or is there a methodology that we can follow to move away from the unbiased? You know, how do we get rid of it? Is there, because I'm a trainer, and there is a theory, of course, that I've learned, that there is a theory of learning where you move from the unconscious competence to the
conscious competence. Yeah.
So you do that. So similarly, is there anything like that? That's
sure.
my question.
So just to expand, because everybody won't know, many of you drive, perhaps some of the students don't drive, but I'm going to just use the driving analogy in relation to what you just said. So let's imagine you're 12 years old and you don't know how to drive, and you really don't care that you don't know how to drive. Therefore, you are unconsciously incompetent. Then you get to about 18, and you look around and say, hang on a minute, I want to drive too. So now you're consciously incompetent. Then you learn to drive. Okay, for those of us who drive, you must remember those lessons, and then you pass the test. Hooray! I am now consciously competent. And today, for those of you who drive, you get in the car, you go from A to B, you stop at the traffic lights, you don't even think about how to get there because you've done it so many times. You're unconsciously competent. Now, in relation to understanding the unconscious bias, you will never be unconsciously competent because your playing field is changing all the time. You will have a new experience tomorrow that will then influence you and impact you, will become your story. So how can you be unconsciously competent? What you must aspire to is be consciously competent. And when I say conscious is the key thing. What's the last line from that poem? When you think about this, was written in the 13th century, think about how powerful that is. The second knowing is a fountainhead from within you moving out. In other words, you want to understand your unconscious bias, the only way that you can do it is by introspection, by self-awareness, by knowing what is inside me. Why am I being influenced? What are my stories? That's the only way. And it's a constant learning process. So that's the answer to your question.
So I have 4 children, and my youngest, who's now 13, when he was 5 and 6, he had a couple of years that were very difficult. So he had a misdiagnosed flu and ended up in the hospital with emergency lung surgery. And because of that shock, and then, you know, following breaking a leg, and so there was a very difficult year for his health. Because of that trauma as a mother, it's very difficult for me to not overprotect him. And my older children, who are 26, 24, and 14, they will always say, well, Mom, you're treating him like he's little. Because when I was 13, I did this and that. So one thing is becoming conscious of my bias, that I overprotect him. So even at 13, I'm a little bit shaky about, well, can I really just send him to the park by himself and meet friends? Where the older ones, because I never had any kind of trauma with them health-wise, I was less protective. And it's that step from being conscious that my behavior is different with that one child to the step after, like transforming
to transform it.
Exactly. That's the
That is the key. That is the key. And what you just said also reminded me of my childhood, which actually, it's only the first time I'm articulating it. When I was 10 years old, I had meningitis and nearly died. Well, guess what? I don't even think about it. Because my parents, and I'm the youngest, like your child, my parents didn't make a big deal of it. So, she's fine now, let's get on with life. And it's only with the benefit of hindsight that you can see that. And I have 3 sons, and my 2 older sons say, for God's sake, why are you so laid back with him? The other way around. But I'll give you another story, because stories are what's so powerful. So when I was doing a training session, the CEO, the male CEO of a company, put his hand up and said he wants to share a story. When he was a child, so he was, I'm guessing, in his mid-50s, and in India, when he was a child, both his parents worked. So for those days, it was unusual that both parents worked, that the mother worked. And so he felt different to all his friends in school. So he made a considered decision that when he becomes an adult and gets married, he would want to marry someone who would be a stay-at-home mum for the children when they arrive, so they don't feel left out the way he did as a child. Fast forward to today, he has 2 daughters aged 20-something. And when he was talking to me, he said, oh my God, I've just realized what I've done. My daughters, who I need to empower, are thinking that I am a chauvinistic man who wants a stay-at-home wife. But that wasn't the reason he was doing it. Do you see the unconscious bias? Do you see how these stories influence us? Yeah? Okay. Another question? Last one.
So, being a rational thinker or an atheist or I would say a revolutionist, is that a solution to be away from this unconscious bias?
Well, when you're using the words like rational thinker, I'm guessing that you're using your new neocortex brain rather than your reptilian brain, because that's the rational way of thinking. And that exactly is the first step towards your unconscious bias. So tomorrow when you meet somebody and your reptilian brain or your unconscious brain or your unconscious bias or your judgment or whatever word you want to use starts thinking, I don't like the look of that person because of X, Y, and Z, your rational thinking brain, because you are naturally like so, will come into play immediately. So you have an advantage to many of us. Because many of us, it wouldn't come into play immediately. We would think what we do, we would make a mistake. But then what we need to do is to reflect. I've run out of time, but I'd just like you to take away one thing. Firstly, we all have biases. Secondly, I say one thing and then I say firstly, secondly. Secondly, we have biases that we don't know that we have. So what I'd like for you to do is to reflect on the biases that you don't know that you have, and see if you can bring them back in the forefront. Bring them into your new neocortex brain rather than leaving it in the reptilian brain. Thank you for your time.